This is the Be Quiet Dark Base Pro 901. It's a massive update to the Dark Base series that I thought was one of the most versatile and feature-packed PC cases that I'd ever seen back when I reviewed it. Something that I actually still think holds true today. This new model improves on almost every aspect of the 900 series and packs in so many features that I feel like I'm gonna miss something during this video, but I'm gonna do my best. So this thing's big, there's just no other way to describe it. It's big and it's heavy, and it's super solid, and the attention to detail and the quality in the build is just top notch. And that's something that I've come to expect from Be Quiet's Dark series of products. These things are just squarely aimed at the high end. The main side panel here is a heavy piece of tempered glass, and it comes off with just 2 thumb screws at the back, really easy to take off. And I like this idea better than the way that you see in a lot of cases these days with glass, where you've got 4 screws right up against the pane of glass. That to me isn't the best way to do it because it always leaves fingerprints and smudges and just doesn't look good. So I like this idea here with the thumb screws at the back a lot better. In the stock configuration, the front panel's solid, but it does have some nice mesh ventilation channels along both edges to really get some air flowing behind that panel, which is nice. Now we can take this whole thing off just by grabbing onto the bottom and pulling on it. Big panel comes off all as one piece here like that. And what we have back here is a little bit of sound dampening material to help keep things nice and quiet. I mean, the company is called Be Quiet, so you can expect to see that stuff on their cases. Now, there's 6 little clips here holding that little panel in there. If we press those in, we can pull it off and replace it with a different one. So I'm just gonna push these in like this. There's 6 of them, like I said, make sure you do them all. And that comes right out like that. So you can put this one aside, and then back here I have the optional high airflow sort of mesh one. So you take that, put it in place, and it just presses right into those clips. And now you've got this sort of high airflow situation here. So if we pop this guy back on, now you've got airflow coming through the sides just like we did before, and the entire front area here. While I have the front panel on here, I just want to quickly show you this little space at the bottom. This is actually a flap that opens up. So if you pop this thing open, there's a 5¼ inch drive bay down here. If you're somebody that likes to use optical drives in your systems, this is one of the few PC cases that still gives you the option to do that. And it's nice because it's concealed behind this little panel. So if someone comes and looks at your PC, they're not going to be like, dude, you're so old school with that optical drive. Everything's kind of nice and neat and hidden and concealed back there. Just be aware that if you want to put a 5¼ inch optical drive in there, you got to watch because it'll conflict with the 2 drive cages that are pre-installed for 3½ inch hard drives. So you'll have to remove that cage to be able to get the optical drive in there. So there's a bit of a trade-off. Just going to pull this off again to show you what else is back here. So back here we have a removable dust filter, and it's not magnetic, it attaches with clips. So you can pull this guy off. Just got to open up those clips. So that comes off for cleaning and for access. And these are 2 pre-installed 140mm Silent Wings 4 PWM fans. And this area can fit up to 340 or 120mm fans or radiators from 120mm all the way up to 420mm. The I/O panel has your power button, 4 USB Type A ports, 1 Type C, 2 3.5mm jacks, and then there's these touch sensitive controls on either side that control fan speed and also ARGB lighting. I really like having a set of manual controls because it frees up one more thing that has to be controlled through software. And if you've got all sorts of different ARGB stuff or monitoring softwares and things like that, it can really be a lot on your system. It takes up a lot of resources and it's just a pain to deal with. So for me, I love having these manual controls right here. Now, if you're somebody that would rather deal with like motherboard control for your lighting and your fans, that's fine too. They've got these sync buttons on here on either side. You can press those, pair everything up with your motherboard and just control it that way. The top setup's similar to the front where you've got these ventilation mesh channels along the side here, get some airflow in there, and you've got a removable panel. This time it's all mesh rather than solid, but there's some panels underneath that are solid that you're gonna have to remove if you really wanna get some airflow going in there. So the way this one works is you just press down and it lifts up a little bit and then you can pull it out. Put that aside, and these solid panels also pop out. Now if I pull one out, you can see they're full of sound dampening material back there. So if you're going for acoustical performance and you want the quietest build you can get, you're gonna want these in there. But if it's about airflow, you can just pull them out. We'll do the same with this one, so you can see there, that's the same thing. Then we can grab this mesh panel, stick it back in there if we want, and now we've got this high airflow configuration. Air is gonna be able to pass right through there or out of there, whatever you're doing. Pull that back out for a sec and you can see we have this tray in here. So if we take these 4 thumb screws out, the whole thing comes right out of there. And what that's gonna do is let you mount your fans and radiators outside of the case, and that is a big deal. A lot of cases have this these days, and it's the best thing ever because you don't have all these restrictions trying to install stuff and put screws in there with a big long screwdriver inside the case where there's basically restricted space. Put this on your desk beside you, install your fans and radiators, put it back in, and you're good to go. Much better way to do it. And I forgot to mention the front works the same way. You can remove the tray up there too. So this thing can support 3 120 or 140 millimeter fans or radiators from 120 all the way up to 360 millimeters up in that top spot. And right up here towards the front where all the I/O stuff is, this is a QI wireless panel. So if your phone supports wireless charging or if you have any other device that supports that, you can just throw it on there and get a quick wire-free charge. Before we go and take a look at the internal features, I just want to quickly show you what's on the bottom of the case. So down here we've got these 4 big metal feet happening, and they've got this nice thick rubber padding, should help reduce vibration and also provide some grip for the whole system. And then we've got this removable dust filter down here, but in order to take that out, you actually have to remove the front panel because it slides outwards towards the front. So if you pop that guy off, this thing just slides out. Clean off your dust, do whatever you got to do, throw it back in, and you're good to go. So the interior here is just absolutely massive. It's going to be able to fit motherboards all the way up to eATX, which is huge. And then you've got some nice cutouts here and some routing options for your cables. There's a big one here up at the top, another one down at the bottom, and this whole thing over here is another cutout for pass-through or passing cables from the back to the front where the board is. And you've got this little cover here to help keep things concealed and nice and neat and clean looking. These little panels back here pop off, and those give you access to these 3.5-inch drive bays back here. There's 5 of them on the interior of the case, and Be Quiet ships 2 drive cages that fit in there. They're actually installed in the bottom in a cage down here under the PSU shroud, and I'll show you in just a minute. But you'd have to take those and install them in here if you wanted to use that spot, or you can buy more separately, and well, if it only comes with 2, but you have all these options, that's what you're gonna have to do if you really wanna take advantage of all the storage opportunities that this case has and fill up all those bays. GPU clearance in here is huge. You can see how much length you have here. It's going to support GPUs up to 495 millimeters in length, which is crazy. But keep in mind, that's the unobstructed length. So if you stick a drive cage in these bottom bays or any height that's going to conflict with your GPU, then that's going to reduce that clearance down to about 350 millimeters. And CPU coolers are supported up to 190 millimeters, so giant air tower coolers are going to fit in here. I don't know any that are bigger than that. I don't think that I've ever tested, so tons of compatibility for CPU coolers as well. This big PSU shroud can come out. You just kind of have to push down and pull back. So that comes out like that, and that gives you access to this entire bottom area. And this panel up here towards the front can come out, okay? And then that can be replaced with this ventilated one. So we'll stick this guy in here. So what that's going to do is increase airflow once again if you need any more airflow in here. But let's say, for example, you have 3 intake fans installed in the front. One of those is going to be partially covered by this PSU shroud. So putting this ventilated panel in here lets you recover some of that air and get it back up into the main area where it needs to be. At the back, there's a pre-installed 140 millimeter Silowings 4 PWM fan, and you can swap that for a 120 millimeter or a 120 or 140 millimeter radiator in that position there. Then we've got our typical I/O shield cutout and 8 PCIe expansion slots. Now what's cool about these is there's this panel here being held in place with 5 screws. If you pop that out, you can rotate those PCIe expansion slots and then reinstall the panel, and then you're all set up for a vertical GPU orientation. But just be aware that this case does not ship with a PCIe riser cable, so if you're going for that vertical GPU setup, you're gonna have to get one separately. But I'm just gonna quickly go through here and make that switch for you so you can see how it works. And down here at the bottom is the PSU mounting bracket. Just comes off with 4 thumb screws. You mount that to the back of your PSU, slide the unit into the bottom of the case, and tighten those screws back up. It's a really quick and easy way to get a PSU mounted in here. And Be Quiet doesn't seem to list the maximum supported length for power supplies, but that's probably because there's just so much space down at the massive bottom of this case that it doesn't really matter. For example, if you look at the biggest PSU they make, the 1600 watt Dark Power Pro 13, that thing's only 200 millimeters long, and that wouldn't even come close to filling up the space down there. The backside's got a solid metal panel here. It comes out with just 2 thumb screws. Loosen those guys off and it should slide back. Comes out, and look at this. Tons of that sound dampening foam material to help reduce those loud noises coming from your build. And it's got this nice ventilation strip here as well. And I'm gonna show you why that's there in just a minute. So we've got 2 3.5-inch bays here at the bottom, and those have the pre-installed cages in them. There's 5 more right here, and then there's 2 2.5-inch bays over here. So the way these drive cages work is you can either do 1 3.5-inch hard drive in here at a time, or 2 2.5-inch SSDs if you mount one on the top and one on the bottom. They both fit in there at the same time. So that means the overall storage options here are absolutely crazy. So you can either have 7 hard drives installed, or 14 SSDs here and 2 more here for a total of 16. And that's a crazy amount of storage for like a consumer grade PC case, something that's not supposed to be a server, that is. So I think what's gonna happen is you're gonna have video editors or just other really big data users that are gonna absolutely love this case for that reason. For cable management and routing, you've got these channels here. There's one at the top, bottom, and then this larger double one here on the side where you're gonna pass stuff through like your main power cable to your motherboard. And all these have cutouts on them and tie down points, so you can use Velcro straps or cable ties, zip ties, whatever you've got, help keep your build nice and clean. Now let's say you don't need or want any of these crazy storage options. All you gotta do is grab a screwdriver, and there's 2 screws back here on the back of this panel with the 5 drive bays. This whole thing is gonna pop out and you can swap it for some different ones that'll open up some more options for you. So now with this bracket, we have room for 3 more 120 millimeter fans or radiators from 120 millimeters up to 360 millimeters. So even more versatility, but it doesn't even stop there. Let's say you just want to have absolutely nothing in this area. You don't want to deal with drives, fans, or radiators along the side. They also ship the case with this panel here. And this one here, what it does is it just pops into this section down here and closes up that entire area. So that whole thing's closed off now, and if you put the back panel back on here, that ventilation strip will be covered as well. Everything's sealed, nothing's getting through there, and that's it. Here's something that I haven't seen come with the case before. So this itself has 2 different functions. Number 1, it's a GPU support bracket to help big GPUs from sagging, because we all know that's a problem these days with how big and heavy GPUs are. But it also has a channel that'll let you route your wires through there, the power cables for the GPU, and hide that stuff so you don't have it sticking out in your case. I think it's a really good idea, but I also don't think it's the best looking solution. It's kind of big and bulky, and depending on your style, you might actually want to show your cables. Like for me personally, I like to use sleeved cables, individually sleeved cables with my power supplies and with my builds, so I don't necessarily want to hide those. So it's really going to come down to personal preference, whether or not you want to use this thing, but I'm all for it. I think it's innovative, and it provides an out-of-the-box solution to get your GPU supported and to conceal some cables, and I think it's a great idea. For the test setup, I'm using an Asus Z790 ATX motherboard with a Core i7-13700K. I got a big deep cool air cooler on it. There's 32 gigabytes of DDR5, a couple NVMe SSDs, Intel Arc A770 limited edition GPU, and an 850 watt power supply. Building in a big case like this is pretty easy because there's so much room to work, and I'd actually go as far as to say that reason alone can sometimes be enough to make the jump to a full tower case. I removed the stock 140mm Silent Wings fans from the front and replaced them with 340mm Light Wings fans just to get some extra RGB in there, and I also added 320mm Light Wings fans to the top panel to help exhaust some hot air faster. The top and front fan trays have built-in PWM headers, so you don't have to worry about cable lengths or having enough open headers on your board. You just plug all your fans right in there, and then you can control them from the front panel touch controls. ATX boards are probably the most common size that people are going to be installing in a case like this, and that Arc A770 GPU definitely isn't the biggest on the market these days, everybody knows that, but this hardware configuration together with that big dual tower air cooler gives you an idea of how much space there is available inside of this case. If you're thinking of adding a whole bunch of hard drives, no problem. Thinking of upgrading to a 4090 down the line, there's definitely room for that too. When set up for airflow, and that's with the sound dampening panels removed from the front and top areas, average temperatures for the critical components were all looking good during the custom run of 3D Mark Time Spy. Sound levels came in around 45 decibels, a decent result in my opinion. The top and front fans were locked in at 800 RPM using the integrated fan controller on the front panel. Now with the solid panels back on and running the same test with the same settings, temperatures went up a few degrees, but not really enough to matter. And sound levels dropped to 42 decibels. Most of the noise during both tests came from the CPU cooler during the CPU stress test portion of the benchmark run. The sound dampening reduced the overall noise profile a little bit, but not enough to make all that much of a difference. Powerful CPU and GPU coolers are going to be heard in either configuration. I spent a ton of time with this case, more than I typically spend doing a case review, just because it has so many features and different configurations to mess around with and test out. You can tell a ton of thought went into this design, from the GPU bracket, tray-mounted fan headers, wireless charger, insane amount of storage options, the front panel touch controls, and the list goes on. At the end of it all, this is my new favorite case, hands down. If I had to pick one thing that I think people won't be too happy about, it's probably the price. But with the Darkbase Pro 901, at least you get what you pay for. I'm gonna have all the specs and details for you down in the description, along with some purchasing links. Make sure you check that stuff out if you're interested. Get subscribed, give the video a thumbs up, and happy system building.